You're very welcome to yet another live stream here on the Mentor Pilot channel. I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic wherever you are. Now, if you haven't been on one of these live streams before, then this is how it works. I want you to ask me questions. I will answer them. I will take priority of questions that comes in through the SuperChat channel or through the Mentor Aviation app, but I will try to answer as many as I can. So today there's a couple of things that I want to go through. I have not said anything about the tragic accident that happened to the Lion Air 737 MAX that crashed a couple of weeks back into the Java Sea. And the reason that I haven't been talking about this is because there hasn't been any official documentation being released by anyone, and I don't think that it is appropriate for me to sit and speculate like the media does about what caused this crash. But what has happened the last couple of days is that Boeing actually has gone out with information to us, the 737 operators, telling us about things that are directly related to the crash of the JT610. So this means that I can start to talk a little bit about what might or might not have happened and what we know so far, and that's what I'm going to do today. So first of all, I'll take some questions. Let's see who's here. Mauricio Mariano, Jaco Pete, every type of video. Thank you. Every type of video is here. That's Adrian. He's helping me out to moderate the chat. So make sure that you stay cool, guys. All right. So what we know so far is that a 737 MAX, a brand new aircraft, only 3-month-old, departed from an aircraft down close to, let's see, let's make sure that we are saying everything right. Anyway, you know where the airport departed from. The important thing is that it took off and it could only fly for about 12 minutes until it disappeared from the radar screen at about 5,400 feet was the maximum altitude that it reached before it suddenly plummeted with what looks like extreme speed into the Java Sea. There was a lot of speculations prior to this. There was a lot of speculations about things like quality of maintenance work, problems on earlier flights, things like this. And it now seems like the aircraft in question have had problems during a couple of its previous flights with its airspeed indication, with its angle of attack sensor. Now, it looks like what they have been reporting is the kind of indications that you would get, which is IAS disagree, altitude disagree. Those are not directly, I mean, they are directly linked to the angle of attack vein, but the problems in themselves can also originate from things like the pitot probe and other things. So we don't know yet what kind of maintenance work was done on the aircraft in question, if the angle of attack sensor was actually even looked at. But the bulletin that Boeing sent out during the last couple of days indicated that if the angle of attack was faulty, if that was sending erroneous signals, then that will lead to both an IAS disagree, as in airspeed indication disagree, altitude disagree. It can also lead to something which is far more devious, and that is that the aircraft will think that it is potentially in a stall situation, and one of the things it will do then is it will start pitch trimming forward. Okay, it does that in order to make sure that the aircraft doesn't go into a stall, but of course that is based on the alpha vane being correct. If the alpha vane is saying, dude, you're heading into a stall, then the aircraft will say, well, if he's not doing anything, what I will do is I will trim forward. And this happens only in manual flight. So it's a feature that is there to help the aircraft or the pilot to avoid a stall situation. In the 737-800 and the 900, we have a similar system, which is the speed trim system, the STS. I'm sure that you've seen a little bit about that. And it does exactly that. It says clearly in the manual that this is what it will do. If it feels like that it is closing in on a stalled situation, well, we're just waiting because it looks like I'm missing internet here. It's standby. There we go. Yeah. So if it feels like it's in a stolen situation, the aircraft is flown manually, well then it will input forward trim, as in nose down trim, for up to 10 seconds. Now the pilots can counteract that with electrical trim. If they do so, it stops, but it restarts again 5 seconds after the latest electrical trim input. So the Boeing bulletin is telling us to do what we're trained to do, which is to do the memory items for a stabilizer runaway. And the stabilizer runaway memory items include disconnecting the autopilot and auto throttle. And if that works, then that is basically it. If it continues, then they put the stabilizer trim cutoff switches to cutoff. Those are the electrical motors being disconnected, basically stopping the autopilot and the aircraft from inputting trim. And if that doesn't work, then we're supposed to physically grab and hold the trim wheel and then trim manually as needed. Now, the thing here is that one of these things, as in stabilizer trim runaway on one side or an IOS disagree on one side, those two things separately are fairly okay to handle. Like, for example, if you have an IAS disagree, we also have memory items as in unreliable airspeed, and I spoke about that in a previous video where we're supposed to set pitch and power. All right, we just put, depending on if we have flaps out or not, we just put the certain pitch, which is either 10 degrees if the flaps are out, or 4 degrees if the flaps are in, and then either 80 or 75% of thrust, and that will keep the aircraft flying. So those are the memory items for that, and the memory items for runaway stabilizer are different. But if you combine these two, you now have a, sorry, I have a, I'm a little bit sore throat today, so I have a pastille in. Well, anyway, if you have these two together, then it's possible that the aircrew was struggling to do the IAS disagree memory items to keep the aircraft flying, and all of a sudden, the aircraft starts trimming forward, okay? And if they let it trim for too long before they realize, I mean, they were flying manual at this point, but the trim can trim all the way to full nose down trim position. And if it does that, it's almost impossible to keep the nose up, right? So if they were actually struggling to do one type of memory items while this secondary thing came in as well, and this all happened at a fairly low altitude, we're talking 5,400 feet, well, then you can see why the sudden drop of altitude and increase in speed that you see on the ADS-B recordings on Flight Radar 24, why that could occur, right? That could possibly, now I'm saying possibly because we still don't know, we're still missing the cockpit voice recorder, but it is possible that you have a series of events, which tragically always tends to be the case when you have things like this happening, where one of them would have been manageable if they had more time, but two of them together in a short time span, close to the ground, relatively close to the ground, could lead to something like this. But we're going to have to wait and see. The indications are, since Boeing is sending out these kind of bulletins, that they have already seen that the angle of attack inputs were faulty. That would then point to a technical fault that, you know, subsequently was not handled exactly the way it should, but you can't really ask that much from the pilot. This is a very obscure function that, yes, it is there in the NG manuals that it exists, but no one has really put it together with a faulty angle of attack sensor. It's only there as something that's supposed to be helping, supposed to help a pilot get out of a approaching stall condition. So it's not mentioned as a possibility, you know, that might cause a sudden and abrupt nose down attitude. It is now after the bulletin, but it wasn't before. So you know, the pilots would have done whatever they could to rectify the situation, and they would have been faced with something that they didn't recognize, which is extremely sad. Then what will happen later on, obviously, is we're going to get all of the you know, the details about this, and that's going to clarify even more exactly what the sequence of events was. But I think that with all of these things coming out, and by the way, if you want to see factual information about the ongoing investigation, I highly recommend AvHerald, that's an aviationherald.com. If you haven't checked that out, you should. It's a brilliant website that cuts away all of the media blubber where the media is guessing things, and it just sends out what the official channels are sending out. Day by day, when more information comes up, it will come with more and more information, and you will see it there. And if you have the Mentour Aviation app, we will also push it out. As soon as we hear something from official channels, then we will push it out through the Mentour Aviation app to you guys, so you can go into the chat and you can discuss it in there. But that was kind of the update that I wanted to come with. I know that's not much, and we haven't really gotten any conclusion. It's going to take probably more than a year before we get the final report, and it's also building on the fact that they have to find the cockpit voice recorder. They have found the flight data recorder, which indicates all of the different computer kind of inputs that comes from the aircraft, so rudder position, throttle position, what the FMC is sending, all of that kind of thing. But in order to understand what the pilots were doing, we really need to hear the cockpit voice recorder, and that was unfortunately kind of thrown out of its box, and it's likely that it fell into the mud, and it's extremely muddy on the bottom of the Java Sea. So they're now trying to find that, and without that it's going to be very hard to know exactly what happened in the cockpit, because it's likely that the pilots would have been talking to each other, trying to troubleshoot, and based on what they were saying, we will know much more about what they were seeing, feeling, and hearing. Okay. So Maurizio Mariano, does these crazy center indications disable auto throttle and autopilot? Yeah, it can. It can. If you start to have these kind of inputs, then it is possible that the autopilot will not even be able to be engaged in the first place. It could disengage the autopilot and the auto throttle as well. Especially the autopilot would be susceptible to this. But the auto throttle, remember, the auto throttle takes its indication from the captain's speed sensor. So if the captain's sensor is in up and it's starting to show, for example, a crazy high speed, well, then the auto throttle will close the thrust to try to counteract that. That will in itself both cause a speed decrease and a pitch down. So that's why the memory items with these kind of conditions is always to disconnect the autopilot and the auto throttle to make sure that we have full manual control of the aircraft. But if you on top of that get nose down trim, it is a very bad day. It's a very bad day, and it's something that you have to react to quickly, because like I said, if the trim is allowed to run away too long, then the stabilizer position might be so put in a basically in a situation where the elevator doesn't have authority enough to counteract it. So you could have the trim so far down that even though you pull absolute maximum back, the aircraft is still pitching forward. All right, that is a possibility if the trim has been let go for too long. But like I said, it is impossible at this point to see exactly what has happened. But once again, what I'm basing these kind of observations on is what has been coming out of Boeing during the last couple of days that has been sent to all of the operators, including the operators of the 737, 800 and 900, not only the MAX ones. So, David R., how are cockpit windows square? Great question. David, are you a Patreon by any chance? Because I have a little bit of a surprise for all of the rest of you guys, but if you're a Patreon, then you know, David, what this surprise is. Yes, cockpit windows are square because they have to be. We have to have bigger windows than the passenger windows, so they are specially reinforced windows to make sure that even though we are sitting inside of a pressurized cabin, they can still be the size they are. So the cockpit windows is something completely different than the passenger windows. They are both heavily reinforced as in the actual material, and the material surrounding the windows is specially reinforced. So yes, that's why you can have bigger windows in the cockpit than you can in the rest of the cabin. Great question. All right, cool. More question then. What's the difference between the 737 and the Airbus A380? Well, there are too many differences to even start discussing that one. Obviously, the Airbus 380 is an enormous aircraft that is built on the Airbus philosophy. The 737 is in comparison, small aircraft that is built on old kind of Boeing 60s technologies. They are extremely different. You can't even. It's like comparing a Volvo 240 to a Audi Q7, something like that. When it comes to technology and age of technology. Cool. So I'll take some questions directly from the Mentour Aviation app here, since I have it up. It's loads of people in there. It's a great community. If you haven't already gotten it, guys, Here are the links, completely free to download. You should be in there, even if you're just an enthusiast, or you're a sim enthusiast, or you're a pilot to be, or you're an actual pilot. The more in, actual pilots like myself and Ava and all of the other pilots in there we have in there, the more questions can be answered quickly. So if you are a pilot out there and you're watching this, then definitely get the app. Okay. Right. So let's see. Mentor, can you tell about any government-sponsored cadet programs? There are not too many, to be perfectly honest. There are a few in Sweden. Well, one in Sweden, but it takes into two different schools. I think there is one in Norway. I know there is one in France. It could be one in Finland as well, although I'm not 100% sure about that. But that is basically it. Government-sponsored programs are exceedingly rare, unfortunately. It tends to be connected to countries that have slightly higher tax pressure, and thus can afford to, for example, sponsor different programs where it doesn't, it's not up to you to pay for it, it's the state that pays for it, and there's not too many states like that. Sweden, I went through the government-sponsored program in Sweden. It was absolutely brilliant. Something that I highly recommend if you are a Swedish citizen to apply to, because it still exists. Cool. So, Mariano again, did you see the new Embraer Predator 500 and 600? No, I haven't looked into those actually. You are free to send me some information if you have them. So, Mikkel Christensen, love the show. Suppose your employer was to add a 777ER to its fleet. What would the recertification process be like for you, and how long would it include TRI and TRE levels take? Great question. So, as Boeing 777 is a completely new type rating. So, for example, if we add 737 MAX to our 737-800 fleet, then there is something called a conversion course. Sorry, not even that, a difference course. All right. So if you have basically two variants within the same type, which it is when you have a 800 to a MAX conversion, then there is a shorter course. And to be honest, there is a small chance that this accident that we've just been talking about, that this difference course maybe was a bit too short. That is a possibility, because if you remember the accident that happened in Kegworth outside of East Midlands Airport many years ago, that was also deemed to be due to a recent change of type within the existing rating. So those guys were used to fly the 737 Jurassic, then they got the 777 Classic. The Classic had more modern instrumentation that they weren't used to seeing, and there were also some differences in systems that they had been taught, but that the course was fairly short. So because of that differences in system, they didn't realize that that the one engine had failed and not the other. They misdiagnosed which engine had failed, and they ended up shutting down the working engine. Okay, and that was deemed to be partially because of the difference course training. So there is a similar difference course training between an NG, a new generation 737, and a MAX, and that is what we need to do at the moment. But we'll see. It's possible that this accident could actually mean longer difference course training, or even something else added to it, because that's what tends to happen when these kind of tragic accidents happen. But if they would add a 777, I would have to go through a completely new type rating. So that would be about 2 months, including ground school, technical course, and simulator training on the 777, and a skill test at the end. And then I would have to work a little bit on it. But since I am a type rating examiner, I would probably fairly quickly be able to start examining on that one as well when I have a little bit of experience on type. It's not even necessary to have experience on type, but generally speaking, it's a good idea to start to know the aircraft well before you start examining people on it. So that's what me and all of the people who would going to fly the 777 would do. And this is why it's likely that people who would do that would only fly the 777. It's very unlikely that you fly both the 777 and the 737. But there are companies who flies like this. There are companies, for example, that flies the 737 and the 787. So there are mixed fleets. Cool. Right, so David R. I am a patron. That's why I asked about the cockpit window. Yeah, I kind of figured as much. Cool, more questions. I'm going to take some questions up here from the normal chat as well. Can you say anything about the Buffett alert? Yes, Buffet Alert is part of the stall warning system. So Buffet Alert is something that you will see popping up on your FMC CDU, the compact display unit, little computer unit, when the aircraft senses that it's closing in on a stalled condition. So there's numerous indications that you are closing in on a stall indication. You will first of all see the speed window start flashing orange, and then it will stay as in constant orange or amber. You will have a speed low alert from the aircraft itself, GPWS system. You will have the buffet alert coming up. You will see the pitch limit indicators start coming down. That's the eyebrows that you see on the primary flight display, and they will start coming up when the aircraft feels that it's in low speed conditions. And then subsequently, when you actually close in on the barber's pole, you will either get stick shaker or you'll get buffeting. The aircraft actually feeling aerodynamic buffeting coming on. So buffet alert is part of that warning system. Great question. So let's see here. Wait. What's happening often about 10 minutes into the flight from, for example, Amsterdam and Berlin, when it sounds like the engines are turned off, it always scares me. It also appears that the plane is falling. It shouldn't be about 10 minutes in. What I'm guessing that you're hearing is when we reduce from takeoff thrust to climb thrust. That happens maximum 5 minutes after departure. More likely, it's going to be about 50 and 100 feet above ground. So we're talking about 3 minutes or something like that, maximum. And what happens then is that the aircraft engines are designed to. I'm just going to put this back on. There we go. Yes, the aircraft engines are designed to go on takeoff thrust only for a limited amount of time, 5 minutes. And after that, they have to be reduced back to either max continuous thrust or to climb thrust, whatever we have set. So that's what you tend to hear. And the falling feeling is just a lack of acceleration. Remember I talked about somatogravic illusion on my previous podcast? Well, that is kind of what you're feeling. Because you're feeling that the aircraft is not accelerating or not climbing as quickly, you're actually feeling it like a deceleration and a slight pitch forward. So that is just your body being fooled by the differences in acceleration. This is actually what we use in our flight simulators. We use somatogravic illusion in our flight simulators to trick the brains of the pilot that they're accelerating, decelerating, climbing, descending, turning, and stuff. The only thing the simulator is actually doing is using the inner ear, the sensors, to fool the brains that, okay, shit, yes, I'm accelerating because I'm being pushed back into my seat. Well, it's actually the simulator is pitching forward. Fantastic machines. Right, so have you ever had someone fail a line training? Yes, that happens. Okay, very rarely, but it does happen. The line training is we're doing our absolute best to make sure that everyone get through line training to get the absolute maximum support there is. But if we feel after a certain amount of sectors that there is no increase, that the pilots are not progressing, that it's likely that they will not be able to get to a line check, which they have to. At some point, they have to be called a quits, and that's going to be up to me to a certain extent, but also to the chief line training, the chief instructor line, and to the head of training of the company that you're flying for. They will review the file and see, is there any increase? Does this pilot actually get better, or is there no improvement? Well, then there's not much to do. So it happens, but it's very, very rare. How different is the feeling of piloting a 737-800 versus a 700 or a 900? Is it hard to get used to different variants? To be perfectly honest, I haven't flown any other variant than the 800. I am trained on the 700 as well, which is shorter. But all right, just stand by, guys. We're just waiting for the internet to kick back in. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There we go. So back again. Right. Yeah. So there's. I haven't tried it, and I would love to. The 700 I'm trained to fly, and the only difference really is that it's shorter. It's much less likely to tail strike, for example, yeah, there are some other technical differences in it as well. The air conditioning system is slightly different. There's less emergency exits but the handling itself is not supposed to be much different. That's why we actually use the 700 in my company to do the base training for the 800. So the cadets who've done their type rating, they will go out and they have to do their 6 takeoffs and landings before they can fly with passengers, and they do that on the 700, but that's free. So the difference in handling is very, very, very small. Omar Selim, hi Petter, I'm done with training and I will start working as an avionics mechanic in Malta. Have you ever been to the city? How do you like Luke Airport? I love Luke Airport. I love it. It's one of my favorite airports to fly to. Alright, so losing internet again. Okay, back again. Yeah, so I love Lucca. Lucca is one of my favorite airports to fly into because it's on an island. There's not much terrain around. There are great air traffic control units. It's a long runway. ILS is from both directions. Very, very good facilities. So I love flying there. And yes, I have been there. I haven't been into the city much. I've been walking around a little bit, but I've had some fantastic food in Malta. I love Malta. It's a great place. I would love to visit it more if I had a chance. Right, guys, I'm not going to do a full hour today because I'm doing earlies tomorrow. So I'm going to do maybe half an hour or so, then I'm going to have to go and feed my family and get ready for bed. But there will be a bonus episode coming out, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. And also, make sure that you get the app, right? It's Black Friday coming up soon, just as a hint. Mentor, have you ever had to perform the windshield escape maneuver? It looks kind of cool to do. If you want to see how I do a windshield escape maneuver, I have that inside of the app, right? If you just get the windshield escape collection inside of the app, you'll see how I do both the windshield escape maneuver during takeoff and during final approach before landing. So I highly recommend you check that out. And yes, it is quite a ride. If I've done it in reality, no. Because we do our best to make sure that we don't get into situations where we have to do a windshield escape maneuver. So that's avoiding CBs, not flying even close to them. We have a rule in my airline that we can't fly into an airport where there is a cumulonimbus, a storm cloud closer than 3 nautical miles away. That helps a lot to make sure that that doesn't happen. But if you do find yourself in it, and if you want to find out how we do it, I have that collection inside of the app. So get the app now, okay? If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do a test actually. If enough of you says yes here in the normal chat now, if I can see enough yeses, then I will do a 2-hour half price reduction on the complete collection in the app. Okay, that's all. That's 2 hours of instruction. That's me showing you how to set up the aircraft from from dark and cold until it's ready to taxi. That's the TCAS. That's the rejected takeoff and evacuation. That is engine failure maneuver. That is it's 2 hours of instruction for me, and it looks like there's enough yeses in here. I want a few more. Come on, quickly now. Great. Oh, we have a no here. Oh. Anyway, well, that's enough yeses. So I will do that. I will put it on for 2 hours. Okay, 2 hours until 10 o'clock tonight. I will have the complete collection set to 50% off. All right. Right. I'll take the last couple of questions before I go here. Maurizio Mariano, food, meat, fish, or chicken? I love all types of food. I'm one of those that if the food is if good enough, if you're thinking about the food that I had in Malta, it was everything. It was both meat, fish, and chicken. But I love seafood. Seafood is great. A steak is fantastic when I can have it. Unfortunately, my 18 years of flying has kind of screwed up my stomach big time. So I have had to stop eating gluten, for example, because my stomach can't take it. And now I'm starting to feel it with red wine and with red meat as well. It's starting to be quite bad, actually. So I'm feeling it's getting more and more kind of narrow what it is that I can eat before my stomach tells me to stop. That's one of the downsides of having it pressurized and depressurized 4 times a day for 18 years, I guess. But that's it, guys. Guys, I hope that you like this one. There will be more live streams coming up. If you have the Mentor Aviation app, once again, I'm gonna keep pushing it, guys. So then I will tell you when I do a spontaneous. Sometimes I do live streams on Instagram as well. So I always go out in the app and say, guys, I'm gonna be live on Instagram in 5 minutes because I love Instagram. Live, because you can interact. So for example, I can see when someone else wants to interact, and I can open up, and then I can kind of share the screen together with one of you guys and actually have kind of a one-on-one talk on the live stream. I would love if you two could do that, but so far it can't, and I do that on Instagram sometimes. If you haven't followed me on Instagram yet, it's mentor_pilot. Okay, you can find me there. And then yeah, I pop into the chat at least once a day, probably more times, especially during weekends. I mean, there are quite a lot answering questions. Just tag @mentor, and that sends me a question or a message, or just hello or good evening. A lot of people just says good evening or have a great day. Mentor, a pilot who caused a crash because of his own mistake, does he lose his job? That will be the final question today, guys. That is depending on why. Right. First of all, a crash is very rare. Okay, but pilots can cause issues by incompetence or by mistakes. And what will happen anytime that something serious happens is that there will be an investigation, normally both by the airline and by the authorities, and they will investigate exactly how this happened. Not only to prosecute the pilot, but to make sure that there's not something else in the background, something that we can avoid, so that we can send out a message to other operating crews. If a pilot were to make a mistake due to gross misconduct, as in disregarding rules, disregarding operational procedures, SOPs, things like that, then yes, then it's likely that he or she would face disciplinary procedures. But if it is an honest mistake where they have tried to do everything right, but it just went wrong, or they missed something, or something like that happened, and it is an honest mistake and that is proven, then normally what happens is that you get some retraining. You maybe need some CRM training or some training in the simulator, or some some line training or whatever it might be, to fill in the knowledge gaps that have been found. And then you do another line check, and then you're back online again. This is not it's not a occupation where the companies are looking for reasons to fire you. It's not like that. And all pilots, we try to be as professional and good as we can, but sometimes everyone make mistakes. I make mistakes. Any one of you guys who've been doing line training with me, who's watching this, know that I make mistakes every day, and I make wrong calls and make stuff like this. This is part of being human, and it's not something that the airlines are not trying to employ perfect people. That's not what it's about. But we try to minimize the mistakes by following standard operating procedures, by following the operations manuals and the bulletins and everything that gets sent out to us. But if that fails, providing you've tried to do your job, and providing that you've been honest and report the issue, so that you made a mistake, okay, this happened, you write a report down, that you do not try to hide it, well then normally the outcome is positive for the individual pilot as well as for the airline. So with that bombshell, I want to say thank you to all of you who've been watching. Have a fantastic continuation of your Sunday day, evening, or night, depending on where you are. And I'll see you inside of the app. I'm going to go over there now and fix the discount for you. So see you in a bit, and stand by for my Friday video. It's going to be cool the next coming Friday. Bye-bye.